get some water next to me so that I won't actually dry my mouth out. There we go. So I'm going to go through my program bit by bit and explain what I did and try to explain my logic behind things. Now, almost every little bit of my program was written by me. I did a lot, except for maybe one line which I copied from the processing website. That it's basic. Get mouse event when I'm googling for how to use the mouse events. In that case, it's exactly the same. I just changed the variable name. So that those kind of things I copied and paste. The only other thing I really copied and pasted was the actual data that was provided by the class. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to execute the program, and it takes a little bit to get up. If that wants to come up, okay, there we go. It seems to be taking a little bit of time, a little bit of delay for OBS to actually capture it, so I'd be careful of that. So what this actually is that the keyboard can navigate through this, albeit very poorly because I don't really know how to do it. OBS seems to be slightly delayed in it, so bear with me. So I'm pressing the Q and E buttons now, pressing the A and D buttons now, and the W and S buttons now. So I tried my best to get it into a WASD thing, but it seems to be focusing on the origin point. Is that the cursor over the origin? And I'm not sure, and I tried my best to try and have it centered around the meat of the data, but it doesn't want to do that. So processing actually does not have a 3D cursor, which means that I wanted to have it such as that if I scrolled over a cube, that it would pop up and give me the player data. It didn't allow me to do that, so I basically had it just that it displayed the actual numbers under it, and it displayed it in the color of the cube, so that it would be a little bit clearer to see which string of data is to which cube and player. So at the top you have the player name, and at the bottom you have the player data. When I get to it, I'll show you how you can just comment out the line that displays the data or the name, so you can have just one or the other, so that's a little bit clearer when you're moving around. So as you can see, you have the free throw percentage on this axis, and you have the 3-point percentage on the other axis, and field goal percentage on the other axis. I'm not exactly sure which ones this correspond to. I'm guessing free throws percentage is the x-axis, 3-point percentage is the y-axis, and field goal percentage is the z-axis. One other thing you can do that I forgot to show is that you can zoom in and out on this with the scroll wheel. I think I did mention that. Yeah, 3 a.m. But yeah, you can see how this entire thing goes from 0 to 100, and it's a 300 pixel by 300 pixel thing, and that's so that the mapping kind of makes sense. I really should have had it such that it's larger, so that the text is a little bit clearer while being smaller, but at this point it's a little too late for me to change that. So I'm going the thing is that at that point it's less about the program itself and more about the aesthetics, which in this particular one I'm not so much going for aesthetics and more going for functionality. So here I have an array list of cubes. So I used an array list because if I wanted by any chance to just add a player to this array, then it'd be easier for me to it'd be easier just to add another cube. So if I was able to do this properly and add an entire player, another cube should spawn in the window without error. So I'll get to the array list, which is actually defined in this class. Well, it's called in this. It's an array of these cubes. This class of cubes, but I'll get to that later. So here's the scroll wheel count, and it just it just basically counts the total number of scrolls in, so that it can 1 second. So that you can actually define how much you're zoomed in. The event actually detects the actual event, and that is over here. It just detects the mouse event, and it counts them, and it just adds it and stuff. So here's the initial definition of the camera positions, and I define it in such a way that it is pointed. I'm opening it up now, so it might take a couple seconds to pop up. Such that it's pointed in this angle. If I change that, then it would be positioned in a different area. And you'd have to find it first. So this just basically finds it for you, and it'll also, when you hit, one thing I didn't show is, come on, OBS. I opened the program. There we go. One thing I didn't show is that if I just make this a really weird thing, and I'm like, oh no, I don't want to reset it myself, I have it such that if you hit R, you can reset the view. So it just, in the program, it will reset it to there, and that is in there somewhere. I'll show you. So here's the actual setup thing, and it just defines the size of it, and it sets it to P3D, which allows processing to work in an OpenGL 3D renderer instead of the standard 2D render. So here's just the initial definition of the background. I don't necessarily need to do that because there's one in draw. And here's where I'm defining an array list of cubes and an instance of that, just as a setup, because obviously I don't want it to be doing it over and over again in draw. So here's the background in draw, and obviously I want it in there at the top so that it redraws the background so that it's not, because if it's not there, then what's going to happen is come on, OBS. Yeah, see, it's going to do that, and we don't want that. We don't want that. So we have the background in there to draw it and stuff like that. So here was an attempt to get it so that it rotated around the average of the points, like the perfect average in there of the X, Y, Z axis up there, and it didn't really work, but it seems to do something with the positioning. So I'm keeping it as is, because otherwise I'd have to manually change it, and that's in this section that actually defines the camera and the scroll. So here I did event plus 600, like the event is actually how many scrolls total. I think I got it backwards up there. And if I change the wheel count to, let me type that here. So if you change the coefficient here, you can just change how fast it scrolls in and out. But so here's where it was supposed to do something, and I don't know, it didn't do anything. So it basically just scrolls it in and out. Like here's the wheel count, and then at the very end of it changes it to 0, so that the count to 0, so that it can start at the beginning and not do something, like not continuously zoom. You know what I'm saying? So this just zooms in and zooms out. So here, like wait a minute, something's weird. That should be event minus, but it seems, oh yeah, it's plus because this will return a negative value. Never mind. So that'll return a negative value, which actually subtracts from the event, which makes it smaller, which zooms it out. So this actually just defines the keyboard navigation. So if I open the program, which I'm not going to do just to demonstrate something you can't even see, if I hit caps lock and I moved it, then you'd be able to still navigate, because you can define it for both the capitals of all the WASD thing. So that's very important in video games, because you don't want to get locked out of something if your caps lock is on. So this just defines the camera position things, and down here, it just rotates the thing based on the X, Y, and Z positions of this thing. But if you hit R, it resets the entire thing back to the default things that I defined in the original thing, and resets the event back to 0, which is the scroll count, so that it resets the entire view. So this is the entire keyboard event detector. And honestly, I should add and set up so that'll just allow people who execute this program to know how to navigate. So yeah, that's just a very easy line just to give the instructions on how to use it. So that was that. So here I'm defining the color mode as HSB, because that's hue, saturation, brightness, because the default is RGB, and it's easier for me to use It's easier for me to use HSB when it comes to the age parameter, which is actually the fourth dimension. So I don't know if I mentioned that. I probably did. Oh, am I missing something here? Oh, I am missing a semicolon there. That's why. So as you can see down here, it says it gives the navigation information first of all, and second of all, I don't know if I mentioned it, but the oldest player, who is 38, is in purple, and the youngest player is in red. And I basically just mapped the players to colors, and kind of cut it off such that it doesn't cycle back to red, um, so that player colors the player colors can be different. As you can see, there's a lot of similar ones, and that's because a lot of players are the same age. So from here you can tell, oh, who's the youngest player in the NBA 2015 data? Anthony Davis. And who's the oldest player? Can I see that? Duncan. Yeah, Duncan. I don't know why that cuts off. Oh yeah, it's because that. It's Duncan. Tim Duncan. He's the oldest player. He's 38, and Anthony Davis is 21, if I remember correctly. Really, I should have the age also displayed down here, because with that parameter. But then it would get too long. Who cares? I'm going to change that to did I put player age in here? I didn't put player age in there, so whatever. Oh, you know what? Let me edit code real time, because I'm going to explain this section anyways. So here, this is just saying the x position is the just taking the floats of the data that was provided from the course. This is all the NBA data that has been used, and here it's just an array. It's just an array that was provided, and I didn't want to type up the data all on my own, so I just used what was there. Honestly, if I had the time, or the patience, I have plenty of time, I would probably space these out and have them such that they are in the proper rows and columns. But the ones that actually matter are the age, which I converted, that's what I edited to be floats, because for some reason it wasn't working if they weren't floats. And these three are the important ones. So here you can have the data. They're in sections. This is incorrect. It should be. When I hit auto format, it kind of threw things off. Really, this is 16. Then this is 17, and that's 18. That's what's important, so there we go. So that's 16, 17, 18 of the field goal percentages. So what I'm just essentially going to do is I'm going to add another thing. Actually here, I'm going to add it here. So I'm going to add age. Then I think their age was in position 2. No, 3. So now when I run the program, and wait for OBS to pull it up. Even though it goes off the screen, their age is pulling up their last name. Okay. Oh, I said 2. It should be 3. Do something. I don't know if this will work. Yes, that works. I just essentially changed it to strings, to integers, so that it actually looks like normal age, not like 30.0. So, okay, let me explain this now. So this essentially just takes the things so that they're coordinate points, and this also just defines the full name. Really, I should take this and move it down here because it's related to that part. So this is just mapping the positions of the x positions, y position and z position, because they're all parts of 1, right? So I just mapped it such that it goes instead of from 0 to 1, it goes from 0 to 300, so that it actually is spaced out. And if I wanted, I could really just change this to a variable, and wherever it had 300, and I can, like for the grid drawing, I can proportionally change that there, but that's not the point of this. So here's also an important thing. So I'm taking their age, and I'm changing it to a value that's going to be the hue. And I mapped that from between, really I can make this 21 and 38, because it's inclusive. And I mapped it from 1 to 80, which I'm going to really do from 1 to 95. So that it's a little bit more varied in color. Yeah, so here, see maybe I shouldn't do 95, maybe I should do 92. No, that's still too reddish. Oh, that's actually magenta, but let me make it like 90 so that it's a little bit less magenta, like a little bit less obviously. Yeah, that's perfect. So now there's a lot more color variation in between the ages. So that just gives the age range. I honestly could have had another parameter that took one more set of data, let's say PTS, whatever that is, points or whatever, and I could have had it such that it changed the size of the cubes, but then I run into the issue if something is too big, then it might clip into another cube, and I didn't want that to happen. I would have done it had I really thought of a way to make it so that it was still legible while not clipping into other cubes. So here's defining the full name just by wanting the full name of the player. Really, I should have plus space plus that, so that there's a space between their first name and last name. I'm not going to run the program again to show you. Whatever I do run it, I'll show you. So here's just actually a very, 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 very important line. It adds all of this thing for this I, for this index, for the index I, which is index 1, then index 2, then index 3. Draw the cube corresponding to this index and put it doesn't, well, it's not really drawn, it's putting it in, put that object, that cube object, in the array. So it's asking is to put it in the array. So now I'm going to take a sidetrack and from the main program to show you the actual class that defines the box, since that's where we're at. So here we have the cube color. These are all just the same things that are just defined so that we can use it in the class of cube. So here it's taking the inputs and basically allowing me to modify it by using it in this program. And here's the actual part that draws an individual cube. It defines what a cube is. It doesn't draw it to the screen, but it draws that cube with that, tells it where to put the cube, what color to make it, and what stroke it has, and everything like that. So here's a push matrix and pop matrix to put it relative to the cube itself. So I'm going to translate the cube to the x position and y position and z position of the actual calculated xy thing, so that it, the xyz thing, so that it's in space. This is just a little aesthetic thing. It just rotates the cube on by the frame count. Just it rotates it so that it looks a little dynamic. Here I'm setting the stroke to black for the thing so that you can actually see the cube color. You can see the cube's edges easier. I'm setting the stroke weight to 2 so that it's not overwhelming, but you can still see it easily. For some reason I had to redefine this here. I guess it's because I had to define it locally. That doesn't make sense, but it's there. So this defines the cube color itself in the hue part of this. There is something in my ear. Hair got in my ear. That was not comfortable. So cube color is like the hue of there, so, and that's the calculated positioned thing that's proportional to age. The redder it is, the younger it is, the pinker it is, like, well, the more purplish pink it is, the older they are on the ends of the spectrum. So I'm just keeping the saturation at 100 and brightness at 100 so that it's vibrant, bright colors. And this is the part that actually draws the box. If you wanted to make the box bigger, you can change this number to 6, or if you wanted to make it smaller, you can change it to 4, and so on. So this just ends the matrix. So here's what actually draws the text. So this just draws the, I'm changing the text mode to model, which locally, there I defined it elsewhere, but this locally defines the text mode to a 3D model because the other one is defined in a function. So here, this allows me to manipulate it like it's a 3D model. I set the stroke to no stroke. I set the text size to 10. I aligned this text to the right because I wanted it to be easier to read it with respect to the right, and the same thing with the left. So this is the player data, so this is just the age, the field goal percentage, the actual numbers, and this is the this is the thing. So if you thought that there was too much, you can comment out these 2 lines of code, and come on, OBS. Come on, OBS. There we go. And now it's a lot less crowded. Before it was very crowded, now it's not that crowded. But if you wanted it more data, you can uncomment these lines of code or comment it, whichever. So that just results in a push and pop matrix, so I can do it relative to each other. But that's that part. So that's the end of the main plotting definer. So this actually does another little thing. So this draws the axes and their data. So this is a whole bunch of information that just draws the information. So that stuff is in the bounding box tab. So there's four functions. There's axes and these labels may be off, but you get the point. So this draws the 3 grids, and here first I defined the axes, and this just defines it. Here's where I define it as another model, and this was just really, I don't even know why I have this line there. That doesn't even need to be there. This line doesn't need to be there. That's from earlier on when I was trying to draw actual axis lines, but yeah. So here's the center. It is aligning to the center so that it's easier for me to position them, get it centered and stuff. So here's where I first draw the axis labels, like 20%, 40%, and so on. And I do this 3 times for each axis. Then here I define some color information for the actual labels, the actual names for them. And this was this was a trial and error thing. This was a trial and error thing. So I wanted to try and get it so that it's centered in there, and I basically kind of checked back on the thing to see which label made sense for which set of data. Because if you, like, for instance, if you look really closely, come on, there we go. If you look really closely, there's only one point of data that's super close to its grid. And that corresponds to the 8.3%, the only 8.3% that's in the player array. So where is that? It's in here somewhere. I'm sure you see it by now, so I'm just going to say it's in here somewhere, and it corresponds to one of these values. And it told me which one that is, and then one of them was really high numbered, and it told me where that one is, and that just left the other one that was kind of midway in between things. So that's how I determined which one was which. Honestly, if I wrote this out neater, then I wouldn't have to do that. I would know which one is which, but I'm still kind of getting used to the coordinate system, the 3-dimensional coordinate system in processing, so not 100% there yet. So I do this 3 times for the different labels, with different values, translating it and everything like that. Really, I can delete these rotate things, but it's from a result of copying and pasting, so whatever. This actually defines the grid, and once again, I'm only going to explain one of them. And if you remember from my aesthetic program, the one that draws the the vaporwave synthwave drawing, this actually comes from that program that I wrote. Um, that's why the variables are named really weirdly, because I copied and pasted the red grid one, so that, and I modified it slightly so that it works in 3D. Um, and I played around with these variables such that it drew the lines in correctly. And it was just a bunch of trial and error. Honestly, if I do the coordinate system better, it wouldn't be trial and error. But so that's the only difference between these ones, except for the colors and the positions of this. Other than that, this has the same value of that. And honestly, um, here's the last part of the thing. So this actual end of it just takes the array of cubes and just takes each one and draws them. Um, so that there's 12 cubes, but it starts from 0, remember. There's 12 cubes, and it just draws each cube and draws the text associated with it from the class. And that's essentially all that it is to make the program. So I thought this was going to take an hour to explain, but didn't really take that long. So yeah, that's essentially what this program is, and I actually didn't think I was going to successfully do it, but I managed. It took me a couple of days and a couple of off days where I was working on learning Python actually. And once I get a little bit further along with that, and I'm going to, because in Python I can't really draw things with it. There's nothing interactive, truly interactive with that I can do. It's just text-based things. Once I learn how to do more complex things that do involve graphics, because obviously Python can do that, I'm going to start making videos describing my Python things. So one thing that I saw is that I found a tutorial that allows me to make Tetris in Python. And I'm wanting to go through that program, and I want to take that program, and I'm pretty sure the person that made the tutorial does not know what DAS and ARR and all those Tetris terms are, and I'm pretty sure that he doesn't know what a T-spin is. I want to try and make it such that the program has T-spins and has a lock delay and has all these things, and I want to make it a really guideline Tetris. So once I do that, I'm going to make a video explaining my Python shenanigans. But yeah, for now, I'm pretty happy with how this came out. I mean, I'm kind of upset that I couldn't do the scroll over thing because processing doesn't support that. Um, but I'm actually really surprised that it's supporting what it does. But I'm pretty satisfied with this. So I hope my teacher is satisfied with this too. And thanks for watching. Have a nice day, or night, or whatever. It is almost 4 now.